Just started at your church and now it's time to make a calendar. What in the world are you supposed to do at this point? Hi, my name is Ronald Long and I am going to help you make a youth ministry calendar. Hey everybody, my name is Ronald Long. I am the Youth Ministry Insider, and today we're going to be talking about how you can make a youth ministry calendar. So here's what I want to help you out with. All right, we're going to be making that youth ministry calendar for you so that you can make a calendar that actually works for you, the ministry, and your church at large. Everybody understands having a youth ministry calendar. It can be a pain. You've got a whole bunch of stuff going on. Your church has a whole bunch of stuff going on as well, and you're expected to have events. Some of them should be really fun events, right? Some of them should be really serious events. And how is it all going to fit in with the church ministry as a whole? Well, this is what I'm going to help you think through before you sit down and start making your calendar. The first thing is having vision-driven, tent poles, and church-wide. All right? Let's pay attention to these three things: vision-driven, tent poles, and church-wide. The first thing is vision-driven. Do you have a vision for the youth ministry? Was a vision given to you for the youth ministry so that you can know, all right, this is what the youth ministry is all about? Now, I understand that some youth ministries have the only vision of we should have youth ministry, right? Maybe that's why you got hired at your church in the first place, just to hopefully attract students to the ministry, to build a youth ministry. And so that's like the whole vision, is just student ministry should exist, so we have a youth ministry. And I understand that can be really tough. If that's you, here's the good news. You can create a vision. You can make it something simple, just like, hey, we study the Bible to understand Jesus and to get to know him more. All right, good, great. That at least gives you something to work with. Check in next week for when we do a video on how to create a vision for the ministry. But here are questions you can ask. Why should you do the event? And if it doesn't drive the mission of the vision that you have for the ministry, you shouldn't do it. It shouldn't go on your calendar. And then if it even does go on your calendar, you need to ask yourself, what does having this event add? What does it bring to the table? And if you can't really answer that well, that's not something that you can, not an event that you should put on there. And then would it be missed? If we took this away, if we didn't do this anymore, would this be missed? So like, if you were to say, I don't really think we should have weekly student Bible study anymore. Well, that event would probably be missed a lot, and it wouldn't necessarily drive your vision. Okay, so that's good things to know and things to think about. The second thing is tent poles. When I mean tent poles, think of trying to put up a tent when you go camping without those tent poles. It would be nearly impossible, right, to keep your tent actually up in the air. You put together those tent poles in order to have the structure there. Well, that's what tent pole events are in ministry. You don't need a ton of them, but you do need some. Even really, really big tents, maybe if you think about like a giant circus tent, they might have 2, 3, 4 big tent poles around which the entire rest of the structure is supported. And that's the idea of a tent pole. They're big events. They happen every year, and typically they are growth focused. Not necessarily adding more students, but like helping students to grow. Now, usually with these big tent pole events, it's things like summer camp or a mission trip, maybe a fall and spring retreat, maybe a really big Disciple Now weekend. Whatever these are big events that are your main ones, the ones that really focus on the church youth ministry. But it's more than just that, because there's also church-wide events. Don't be afraid to tag on to something your church is already doing. If your church is really big into VBS, for example, Vacation Bible School, maybe the youth can support that, and that could be an event that goes on your calendar. In fact, maybe some of these events take precedence. I know for me in my church right now, our Vacation Bible School is going on, and about half of our volunteers are students from the student ministry. It's a really big deal, and it gets blocked off every year as this event takes precedence over all other things. And it becomes a youth ministry, student ministry event because they are integral to it happening. It's a win for the church, and it's a win for the youth ministry as well. And so, here's the question. How do I make a calendar? The first thing you want to do is just brainstorm. Think of every event that you could possibly want to do for the youth ministry and put it all down. Remember, when you're brainstorming, no idea is a bad one. And even when you're brainstorming, think about what you'll be teaching. If you've already created like a teaching calendar for the ministry, think about events that might like support or supplement that teaching calendar. It can be really cool to have like some tie-ins going on. And when you're brainstorming, ask adults, ask teens, ask everybody. Use old calendars. If you're coming in brand new to the church and to the youth ministry, ask to see like what other events used to happen. It might give you good ideas for things that you could put on the calendar, some old events that were really popular, or maybe bringing something back and calling it retro and making it really cool. And then once you get a giant list of things you can do for the student ministry, think seasons: summer, fall, winter, spring. All right? And then put one tentpole event in every season. So summer, I typically think of like summer camp or mission trip, big trips. And then for fall, you might think of a fall retreat where you go to a retreat center or maybe somebody's lake house or cabin and you spend time studying the Bible and worshiping there. And then in the winter, maybe you go to a conference, something where you just have to take the kids to the thing, show up and participate. And in the spring, maybe you do a Disciple Now type event where it's a little bit more involved, a little more crazy, but it could be really cool. Think of these events to happen in these seasons. And then once you start placing those big tent poles, think about planning around it. You don't really want to plan a giant, involved, very crazy, very time-consuming scavenger hunt the month before you go on the mission trip, right? You want to space those things out so that you as the leader can focus on the tent poles when you need to. I'm not saying don't do the really big events. I'm just saying that maybe give yourself a little bit of space because you're gonna need it. So think about your seasons and putting one big tent pole event in every season. And then once you're done with that, think reasons, right? What are some events you can do that will drive your vision forward for the student ministry? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it more outreachy things? Well, then put some outreach-based events. Is it more spiritually based? We'll put some of those. Maybe your youth group is just trying to grow and trying to evolve. Maybe you're trying to just have a little bit more fun and fellowship. Okay, well, check those boxes. And then while you're doing that, you can see, okay, these things drive the ministry, they're going on the calendar. And then you can begin to see what's maybe you're doing too many outreach events. Don't come at me. I know, you can never do too many outreach events, but maybe you plan too many outreach events. You understand what I'm saying. Yeah, maybe you have way too much fun events going on and you're lacking in the spiritual department. I don't know, but once you put them down on the calendar, you'll be able to see what you need to do for the ministry. And then this is huge. I've talked about this a little bit. Don't plan alone. Involve everybody, especially when you mention that you are brainstorming events. Involve everyone. Parents, volunteers, staff, students, even other churches in your area. Ask them what has worked really well for their group. You might find out that it's going to work really well for your group. Now, this is an important thing to note. What should you take off the calendar? Maybe there are things that used to work but don't anymore. Now, this is going to be really hard because usually when you are planning the calendar and you're presenting that, when you take things off the calendar, people might start asking like, well, isn't this what like we pay you to do? Sure, you can do this great new fun, really complex and involved event, but why don't just keep doing all the other stuff you've been doing in the first place? This is why having a vision for the student ministry is so helpful. You can say this old event was really great, but it just doesn't really drive the vision of what we're trying to accomplish now. And so these are things that you might take into consideration when you want to take things off the calendar. Things that distract from the vision. You've laid out a vision for the student ministry, you know the direction you're heading in, and if the event takes you in a different direction, take it off the calendar. It doesn't serve you anymore. Or maybe there are events that just take too much time. They are maybe really cool, they sound great, they're a ton of fun, but if you're going to maintain all of the other responsibilities that you as the youth pastor have, you just can't do that event and everything else. Or maybe there are events that are just poorly attended. Maybe you've even done them for a few years in a row, and students just don't seem to get behind it. It's okay to take that to leadership and say, I understand the senior pastor wanted me to go pick strawberries in the strawberry field, but here's the deal. I've had 2 students show up every time we do that. It's not fun. They don't like it. We're not going to do it anymore because it's a poorly attended event. So what I want you to do is think about why you should take things off the calendar just as much as you think about putting things on. Here's the deal. Planning a youth ministry calendar is tough. It can be involved and it can take a lot of time. If your church doesn't have like a regular rhythm for planning out the calendar, now's a great opportunity for you to establish that. When do you put out a calendar? When do you plan these big events? What does budgeting for all those things look like? And the great news is, if you plan your calendar first and you get that approved by your senior leadership or your boss, you can then go, well, hey, this is on the calendar. I need a budget for that. We'll talk about all these things in future videos, but do me a favor, please. I love creating youth ministry content. I hope you enjoy youth ministry content. Do all the YouTube things for me. Like the videos, subscribe to the channel. I plan to release weekly helps for youth pastors with the Youth Ministry Insider. So my name's Ronald. I've really enjoyed hanging out with you and talking about calendars. I hope you've learned a thing or two. Let me know down in the comments what I've missed or what suggestions you have as well. We'll see you next week.